So we are continuing our discussion on this well-known book, Vivekachudamani, which is an important introductory work on Vedanta. And in the last session, we already discussed the way to start our spiritual inquiry. It's a very well-known verse, just a repeat, just a recapitulation. 66th verse of this text. Aptoktim khananam tatopari shilabhagashanam swikritim nikshebas samapekshade nahivahi sabdestu nirgacchati tadvat brahmavidopadesha maranadhyanadivillabhyade maya karitirohidam samamalam tattvam naduryuktibhihi. It's a very well-known verse. So, the whole process of spiritual inquiry is described using a very interesting metaphor and analogy. Suppose we get word, we get information that there's a huge treasure hidden somewhere in a distant place. How do we try to get that treasure? So give an example from empirical life. First of all, you should get information about where it is likely to be hidden. And then we should go to the place. And the verse tells you that it is kept inside a pit, maybe in a pot. And then it might have been kept there hundreds of years ago. And there's a huge stone slab that is kept on the surface. So we should first of all get information, some information we need to know about the place where it is likely to be kept. We should go there, we should dig deep, and then we should see where it is kept, and then we should remove the huge stone slab. Then we can place our hands on the treasure box. This is compared to spiritual life, or spiritual life is compared to this. That means, first of all, we must know that there is something other than these pleasures and enjoyments or empirical experiences. Something other than what we normally call empirical or worldly happiness and enjoyments, the enjoyments of the senses. What we eat, what we enjoy, what we experience. Not that it is insignificant or it is negated, but there is something beyond all that, and that's the purpose of human life. This we should know, this information. We may start thinking of higher life when we read a good book, go to a library, or we may listen to some lecture, some talks, or maybe conversation with good friends. And from there we come to know, well, life is not just meant for enjoyment. Life has got another purpose, higher purpose. And then we should try to learn more about this higher spiritual purpose in life. And then we may try to learn more, we may try to approach somebody, and from a teacher we may learn, and then we make spiritual progress. So that whole analogy is mentioned in the 67th verse. We discussed this earlier. It is 66th and 67th verse together. And then the 68th verse, Tasma sarva prayatnena Bhavabandham vimuktaye swenaiva yajna kartavyo yogadereva pantitaihi. So, just as somebody who is sick will approach a doctor, go to a hospital, will try to buy medicine from medical shops or Walgreens somewhere. Like that, there is a disease. What is a disease? The disease is the wrong notion that life is meant for physical enjoyments. That's a disease. And it is called a bhava bandha. Bhava means bondage, empirical bondage. So this is a disease. Now, surprisingly, you find the moment we start adding something else to our life plan, other than just physical enjoyments or sensory pleasures, you find a kind of special blessedness you feel. And one important way to test these, when we get, whenever we face a crisis, a dilemma, a difficult situation in life, whether maybe the banks may collapse and maybe stock markets may collapse, we may lose money in the stock markets, or we may lose our job for some time because nobody remains unemployed all his life. Even if you try, you cannot remain unemployed unless you want to remain unemployed. So whenever any of these difficult situations come, then if you have something else to think about in life as a supreme goal, some higher purpose, then we'll be able to deal with these temporary disturbances and problems in a much more healthy manner. We will face the problem, but we won't be devastated. You won't be mentally crushed, you won't be shocked by worldly problems. So bhava bandha is actually kind of worldly bondage. So sarva prayatnena bhava bandha vimuktaye means liberation from worldly bondage. Sarva prayatnena means make all possible effort. In ancient times, if you think about Buddhism and Hinduism in ancient Vedic times, great men, emperors and kings and students used to leave their home and the empires, and you have heard many stories you find in the history of Buddhism and Hinduism, Vedanta. But that's not what we are talking about right now. Even in this 21st century, if we can even live in Silicon Valley, most happening place maybe in the world, where any day you may lose your job and next day you may get a new job, again only to lose it the following day. Again to get back. Now this is happening. Now in the midst of all these problems and difficulties and uncertainties, if we can keep in mind that there's a higher purpose of human existence than these worldly things, then that sense of higher purpose will help us to deal with worldly problems and uncertainties in a much more healthy fashion. Our mind won't be devastated when there's a problem. And in this, the third and fourth line, that great teacher tells you, Svenaiva yajna kartavyo rogaderiva pantitaihi. So those who are enlightened people, enlightened is not like Buddha. Enlightened in the sense those who have got, this conviction, life is not all meant for physical enjoyments alone. That kind of enlightenment, that itself is not a small thing. Even to get an intellectual idea that life has a higher purpose itself is a sign of some kind of enlightenment. Some kind of what we call growing maturity, so to speak. When you become more mature, then we come to know, life has some higher meaning and purpose in life. So just like a patient who has some illness he's suffering from, will go to hospital to meet a doctor and get treatment. Like that, a person who is convinced that he is suffering from a great disease. And the disease is the wrong notion that life is meant for enjoyments alone. To get rid of this disease, you have to take a different kind of medicine. Medicine for the soul is different from medicine for the body. Body will fall sick again. But any little treatment that we do for keeping our soul healthy will have a permanent effect. That's why in spiritual life, even a small little effort will have a lasting effect, not anywhere else. Even if you do a small little act of compassion, generosity, hospitality, love and affection for living beings or the animal world, anything, even try to do something for the conservation of nature. Any of these activities will be like a permanent deposit in the spiritual bank. It will remain there. And according to Vedanta and Buddhism, which believe in the doctrine of law of karma and in the doctrine of reincarnation, rebirth, the deposit is bound to produce its result, not anywhere else. So it's totally different. You cannot put the entire responsibility on a God. Oh, I believe in you. Okay, fine. He gives you a blank check. You can do whatever you want. That luxury is non-existent in Vedanta. The responsibility is on our own shoulders. We have to become good human beings. Without that, if you, play allegiance to a created God, it will have absolutely no effect. Because if you believe in God or have any spiritual sentiment, it should reflect in the way we act, the way we behave with our fellow human beings, in our words and actions. It's not just a belief in something. One can believe or claim to believe in whatever he wants, but he can be totally non-spiritual, the opposite of spirituality. That's why this bondage should be, first of all, considered to be a disease, and then we should try to approach the right doctor for medicine for this disease. Tasma sarvaprayatnena bhavabandha vimukte. See, sarvaprayatnena, by all means, by whatever kind of efforts you are capable of, do anything. Even if we spend our time and energy for some acts of compassion, or some, instead of looking at life as just a means for physical enjoyment, if you can take interest in literature, poetry, music, mysticism, that is also one way of course, very remote, indirect way of approaching spirituality. Because we are lifting our own level of consciousness beyond the physical level. That's very important. And Einstein cannot be as worldly as somebody who considers life just as the opportunity to make more money. Such a person cannot become an Einstein or a Newton. Newton won't worry about what happened why the apple fell on his head, if you believe the story or not. Nobody will bother. Even if a big stone falls on his head, still if he's not going to lose money, he won't worry. Normal person. But when we lift our level of awareness and consciousness beyond the body, and that's what we are coming to in the coming verses. When we can think of ourselves as something beyond the body, something above the body, something that transcends the body level, there's a great joy. There's a great inner blessedness. This is a very interesting, this line of thoughts coming out another. Srunushu avahido vidwan yanmaya sumudirite tadedasravana sadhyo bhavandar vimokshase. So the teacher continues promising to the student, well, you will certainly make spiritual progress. You are the right person to ask these questions. Therefore, the teacher is here, he is congratulating the student for asking the right question. That's very interesting. In fact, during the early part of the discussion, when the student asked these 7 questions, so if you can remember, verse number 51, you can see 7 questions are asked by the student. Ko nama bandha kadamesha agadaha kadam pradishthasya kadam vimokshaha koso anatma paramaka atma tayor viveka kadamedat uchchedam. So I am not going to discuss again because already discussed very elaborately. 7 questions. First of all, what is the bondage? How it came about? Then how does it remain? and then how to get out of this, and then what is the non-absolute reality, anatma, and what's the nature of the absolute reality, atman. Please answer these questions. So 7 questions. Now, just after the student put these 7 questions, the first thing the teacher did was to congratulate him for asking the right questions. That's because we'll be able to ask these questions only when we reach a fairly high level of intellectual, spiritual development and evolution. Without that, we won't be able to ask these questions. I may ask the question, look at the stock markets, that's what we do. But we go to library and read a book on mysticism. No, it's not a very pleasant thing for those who are not ready for it. So the teacher begins his response by congratulating the student for the wisdom to ask these questions. Then in the 71st verse, Mokshasya hetu prathamo nigadyade vairagyam atyandam anitya vastushu tatat samaschapi damasti diksha nyasa prasakta akila karmanam prisham. So this continues like that. So the first thing that's needed to get out of this disease of obsession with worldly enjoyment, that's a disease, obsession, extreme attachment, being obsessed with worldly enjoyments. Now, the first medicine is to attain the wisdom. That is the wisdom that helps you to be detached, to disregard things which are non-eternal. This is a literal translation. So what does it mean? Whatever tempts us, whatever temptations come to our mind, taking our mind away from the higher spiritual purpose, those things which are coming and going, objects of worldly enjoyments, they are non-eternal. Therefore, one should have a sense of renunciation, vairagya. So that's why vairagyam atyantam anitya vastu. Anitya means non-eternal. Anything that is non-eternal. We should have a sense of total disregard, indifference. So that's the first medicine. Mokshasya prathamo hetu. The first cause, the most elementary stage, the kindergarten of spiritual life, is a sense of renunciation for worldly things. Again, I would repeat again, it is not a world negating or life negating philosophy, not at all. One may be the richest man in the world. In fact, there is an interesting character in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, one of the most voluminous and most important Upanishad, one of the greatest works in Vedanta tradition. There, a great teacher, he's an emperor. Great emperor, great king. He is sitting in his court. He is now wearing rags. He is living in a palace, well dressed. He speaks philosophy. He does everything, but he is totally detached with his own position, his own empire. He is a big king, he is an emperor, he is his name is Janaka. So that Janaka's empire actually was a very huge empire, like the Magadha empire. Mithila later became Magadha. So later on in the 3rd century BC, 3rd or 4th century BC, one of its emperors was Chandragupta Maurya, who had extended that empire all the way up to today's Afghanistan, right up to Burma, beyond Azerbaijan, up to Sri Lanka. That means roughly around 3 times as big as present-day India. That's the geographical area of that big empire. So the Janaka was not a small fellow, a small guy, very big man, very learned. And in his own court, there were hundreds of scholars. Now, he himself was considered to be an example of a real Vedantin. So can you just imagine a Vedantin who is the richest man in the world, the most powerful emperor. The story goes back to pre-Vedic time, maybe 4th, 5th millennium BC. And he's a great teacher in Brihadaranyaka. There's a long dialogue between Janaka and Yajnavalkya. So you can be a Vedantin even when you are having all the good things from the world, but if you are not mentally and psychologically and you are not spiritually enslaved by your possessions. That's a very important thing. One can remain totally free from this psychological enslavement even while enjoying good, great things in this world. So remember, Vedanta doesn't imply extreme asceticism in the physical sense. One can be a great Vedantic, great ascetic mentally. If you have got everything that you want, still you are totally free from any kind of obsession. You are not obsessively attached to something. You don't think the bank balance is the greatest thing in this world. You may have the highest bank balance, but you can be also the greatest monk, greatest Vedantin. So that's why it says, what is this? Vairagya means anitya vastushu. Everything in this world is anitya, means non-eternal. Therefore, understanding the non-eternal nature, the perishable nature, the impermanent nature of everything in this world, if one can uphold what is eternal, that is spiritual enlightenment, then that's a first step in, there's a kindergarten in spiritual life. It's like an alphabet, learning the alphabets. Tatas shamaschabi damastitiksha nyasa prasata kila karmanam pusham. We already discussed in the earlier verse, 19th verse and elsewhere. That is sadhana chatushtaya sambhati. We already discussed. Those who can remember, you can see that we discussed it very elaborately. So the teacher is asking us to go back to the previous verses. So we can refer verse number 19, where this point is mentioned for the first time in this book. So first of all, being detached from worldly things, non-eternal things, and upholding what is eternal. And this is a very simple method we can practice in our own daily life. Everything, even if you get somebody, you get an email, your service are no more needed next year, you lose the job. Just as the condition of being employed is impermanent, as you know very well, so also the condition of being unemployed also is impermanent. If you lose your job today, you are going to get your job the day after tomorrow. So the idea of the impermanence, which Buddha later, much later Buddha developed into a unique principle of, later you find praditya samutpada and all that, the fundamental impermanence of everything in this world, empirical phenomena. And also the belief in the eternal reality. And then practicing shama, dhamma, uparadi, tidiksha, siddha, samadhanam. It's also mentioned in the 19th verse. Self-restraint, sense control, a kind of contentment, concentration, all these qualities. And also forbearance, persistence, all these. So this is the first step. And then in the 72nd verse, this further explained, Tatasudistan maranam satatudhvanam satatudhyanam chiram nitya nirantaram munehi tato avigalpam parametya vidwan ihaiva nirvana sukham samrichati. So, tata sudistan maranam satatudhyanam. So, afterwards, after that, after getting well established in this sadhana chatushtaya sambhati, the fundamental four qualifications already outlined elaborately in the 19th verse, one should try to feed our mind with good spiritual food, Sudhi. Sudhi literally means Vedas. A more focused reading will tell you, not the whole Vedas, but Sudhi here means ideas or books or works that will help to reinforce our sense of detachment towards worldly things and our idea that life has got a higher purpose. So there are many books that can take us away from this, and there are many books, many ideas that can help us to consolidate our faith in Vedanta. So, and then Mananam. We must read great books. Here, reading itself is not implied because there was no reading in those days. Shankaracharya himself traveled all over India 4 times. He wrote all the huge books. He was not carrying a big library. Most of the time he was walking. Incidentally, the place he was born, the meaning of the place where he was born is foot. And that was the tool that he used to spread Vedanta. 4 times he traveled all over Indian subcontinent, walking. So, it's not that you read books, you listen. Listening can also mean reading, because when you read something, you are actually listening only. That's why you are able to remember. You are not seeing, suppose you look at something, a verse or a statement, you carefully read it, and then you are able to remember it next day. So how are we able to remember it? We are hearing it actually. We are not focusing our eyes on something. So we are able to read mentally, which means hearing. You learn a music lesson in the morning, you are able to remember next day, because we hear in our ears mentally. So, tadas sudhistan mananam. So, mananam means, sudartha mananam means focusing, concentrating on the meaning of what we read, what we hear. That's the meaning. So, first we must listen from a teacher some of these great ideas. Then we must think with great concentration, understanding the meaning, and then those ideas will go deeper into our mental system, and then that can become a part of our common sense that can help us in our everyday interaction with people. So unless we read, we won't understand anything. Reading means listening also. In ancient time, there was no book. So they used to read oral tradition. So Sruti means oral tradition. Modern times, we can extend it to reading, that's all. Then Mananam means concentrating or thinking, contemplating on the meaning of what you hear. Then only the meaning or the sense of what you hear becomes part of our emotional system. Without thinking, we cannot really take any advantage of. We won't be benefited by what we hear. So, and then Nidhyasanam means with deep concentration. Chiram nitya nirantaram munehi. So, now this should be done after listening. We should think deeply, and then we must think of and we must meditate on what we think, and then what happens? This slowly takes you to the next stage, to Nidhyasanam, and then gradually it can help you to take this Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Patanjali in the Yoga Sutras, he tells you, and he emphasizes this point, Sadhu Dirghakara Nairantari Satkara Asavido Tadhabhumi. He says, this practice, that means listening or depositing good ideas in our emotional system. That's what it implies. Lot of rubbish is there already, lot of garbage already there in our mind, mental system, memories. So many things come to the mind. Many of them not at all necessary, some of them positively toxic. So along with that, lot of good, healthy material, nutritious food, spiritual food also should be put in the mental system. And then we should think deeply with concentration. Then we should internalize this through deeper concentration. Eventually it takes you to Nirvikalpa Samadhi. But it doesn't come all of a sudden. It requires long practice. So Patanjali says, Satu Dirghakala, means for a long time we should practice. And then Nairantarya means without any break. Without any break. And also with a sense of sanctity and sacredness. That's very important. Sarkara asevido dudhabhumi means, if you want to be benefited by spiritual ideas that we try to understand, we must have the feeling that this is something sacred, this is something important. It's not just word, it has got a higher dimension. So a sense of sanctity and sacredness is very important, especially in listening to higher ideas in spiritual life. We don't do that when we study engineering or medicine or anything, because everything is interrelated, interconnected. We pay the tuition fees, the teacher gets his salary, the university also gets his funding from different agencies. So the cycle is complete. And then we get a job and all the money we pay the tuition fee get back. So there is nobody is going to lose anything. Actually, nobody is going to gain anything in the ultimate sense. But here, one should think of this spiritual enlightenment as a lifelong endeavor. And if you believe in Buddhism and Vedanta and Hinduism, you have to understand that this is an eternal journey. It doesn't end with the end of this physical body. When we are born again, we continue the same journey because we don't lose anything. Even half an hour, if a person has done meditated sincerely in his life, this life, next life, somewhere you find the influence, the residue, the impact of the positive influence of whatever spiritual discipline you practice in this life will manifest sometime in some distant future life. So that's why doctrine of karma and reincarnation are very important. Without understanding these two fundamental principles, we cannot make any sense of Vedanta or Buddhism. These two, Jainism, Buddhism, Sikhism, all traditions, one way or other, believe in these two doctrines. One is the doctrine of reincarnation and the doctrine of law of karma. And those of you who are students of Christian theology, if you believe that, it seems that the early Christians did believe in these two doctrines, but it was removed from the scheme of Christian theology after the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, when the Roman Emperor Constantine declared Christianity as he understood it, maybe different from what Jesus Christ must have taught, as a matter of fact, which he declared as the national religion of Roman Empire. So doctrine of reincarnation and law of karma, these are two important tools to understand this idea of spirituality in any tradition. Otherwise, it's just a lottery, one may get decided on that side. But here, if you pray once in your life, it won't take you to the highest goal at one go, but that won't be wasted. Any sincere effort to practice any spiritual discipline, any tradition, will not be a waste. You are never late and nothing is lost, really speaking. So this idea comes again in the next verse, which is not so very important. Yad bodhavyam tava idanim atmanatma vivechanam taduchyade maya sammik sutta atmani avadharaya. in this 73rd verse, the teacher is telling, now you please listen to me. I'm going to discuss with you, I'm going to explain to you how to discern from the permanent, between the permanent and impermanent. Atma, Anatma, Vivechanam. Atman and Anatman. What's the distinction between the absolute reality, Atman, the divine spark that is present in everyone, in everything, and also that is the permanent reality, and also the impermanent, vanishing world of enjoyments which come and go, which is always in a flux, which changes all the time. In that discussion, the teacher is trying to explain this a very important question. So first he is trying to explain what is Anatman. That means what is the nature of the empirical world, this physical, empirical, impermanent world. So that question, Koso Anatma. What is Anatman? That is the fifth question is being discussed here. So the teacher doesn't ask the first question because the student won't understand. So the teacher comes down to the level of the student. That's a characteristic of a teacher. So the student asked 7 questions, but he did not know where to begin. But the teacher knows where to begin. So the first discussion is a kind of an answer to the 5th question. Koso Anatma, that's the 5th question. And what is Anatman? What is non-Atman? What is the empirical world? What is the impermanent world? And there's a very interesting discussion of the physical body. Sthula Sharira, we call it physical body. So, gross body. Sthula means gross. The physical body. That is changing every minute. Every cell is changing. Some changes taking place to every part of the physical body. That's a description. Majjasti meda pala rekta charma Tugahoi dhadubirabhiranvidam padoru vriksho bhuja pushtamastagaihi angaihi upangaihi upayuktamedat aham mamedi prasidam shariram mohaspadam sthulam iti iride budhaihi. This is a the first important part of the answer. 7 questions, 7 answers. First, Majja asti meda pala rekta charma Tug ahuyehi dhadubihi ebihi anudam padoru vaksho bhuja prishtamastagaihi angaihi upangaihi upayuktamedat aham mama iti prasidam shariram mohaspadam sthulam iti iride budhaihi. So now here is a description of the physical body. So it is described like this. First of all, marrow, bone, fat, flesh, blood, skin, cuticle. 7 substances of the body mentioned here. And then angaihi upangaihi upayuktametat. And then aham mamedi prasidam shariram. Padoru vaksho bhuja prishtamastagaihi angaihi upangaihi. What are these? Legs, thigh, chest, arms, back and head. So all these together constitute what we call the grossest, the most external part of our personality. Obviously, there is nothing very wonderful about any of this. If you go to mummy Egyptian Washington Museum somewhere, you can see the mummy of some Egyptian pharaohs past 5,000 years ago. 3000 BC. So he was also living in this world, a wonderful life. And you don't want to identify with what you see in the museum. There is nothing absolutely wonderful about that object. Now if you can remember that we are also going to be something like that after maybe 150 years, that can make us little more level-headed. in our entire scheme of human interactions with the world. It's very important. Every doctor, every person working in the medical department can become a wonderful philosopher and Vedanti, can be wiser than Socrates, because every day he's confronting this reality. But we should approach the reality with the full conviction that this is what we are at a physical level, but we are something far beyond the physical. With that, if we approach it, it becomes a tool for developing wisdom. So you can imagine Shankaracharya is giving a wonderful description, the anatomy of the grossest physical dimension of a human personality, which again is changing every day, every minute. And you are born, you grow, slowly become your baby, your boy or girl, and young, and then middle age, old age, and then everything goes. And again the journey begins next life. So if we try to interpret ourselves in terms of physical body, there is nothing much to write home about. Absolutely nothing. It doesn't mean that we should become pessimistic or skeptical. This body itself is a great instrument, very useful instrument, very sublime instrument. This body can be a very wonderful tool in our hands to go beyond body. Even to understand the transcendental nature of personality, we can make use of our knowledge of this body. And then, so here, Majja, Asti, Meda, Palarakta, Charma, Tug, Ahuehi, Dhatibihi, Ebhiranvidam, Pada, Uru, Vaksha, Bhuja, Pushta, Mastakaihi, Angaihi, Ubangaihi. Upayukta Meda. So this Sthula Shariram, this external physical body, is composed of, it consists of all this. That is marrow, bone, fat, flesh, blood, skin, cuticle, and legs, thighs, chest, arms, back and head. All this together. That's what physical body is all about. And then what happens? Aham mamedis pratidam shariram. Now, when we identify ourselves with this physical framework and the I, in a way, it's almost like a billionaire suddenly going insane, and he sits in the middle of the street saying that he has nothing, you have to help him. Suddenly it happens, in some psychiatric problems it happens. A person can go totally insane. The richest billionaire can suddenly get the wrong idea that he is absolutely bankrupt, he is penniless. That's what is happening for most of the people who don't understand Vedanta. That's what Shankaracharya implies. When we identify with this physical body, but we are identifying something that can fall sick any day, any time, and disappear. It doesn't mean that we should consider this as something to be neglected, something to be treated as something abhorrent. No. It has got a wonderful purpose. This physical body can also be wonderful, absolutely wonderful tool in our hands. With the physical body, when it's healthy, you can practice meditation. Along with your professional work, we can also read books, we can enrich our wisdom, we can do wonderful work, we can practice spiritual disciplines, which can eventually take us beyond body consciousness. So there's an interesting episode in one of the Greek classics of Sanskrit literature. It's called Kalidasa's Kumara Sambhava, a well-known classic, 2nd century AD, 2nd century AD. Kalidasa is one of the greatest names in Sanskrit literary tradition. Basically, literary tradition going back about 4,000 years. Kalidasa, one of his poetical works called Kumara Sambhavam, which many English translations are available. All of his works have been translated into German, French, Italian, and English, right from mid 18th centuries onwards. So in one of his works, those who can remember, 5th Sarga, 5th chapter, there's an interesting verse. So a great spiritual seeker is meditating on Shiva. It's a mythology, of course, but when mythology becomes part of a great literature, it becomes a very potent tool for expressing a very great spiritual idea. So there are two lines here, Apikriyartham sulabham samit kusam jalani visnani vidhikshamanite abhisvasaktya tapasi pravartase sharira madhyam khalu dharma sadhana. The last expression is the motto of all Indian schools of medicine, Ayurveda. The meaning of the last part of this verse is physical body is the most important tool in our hands. That's the meaning. So, the Parvati, the character, the main protagonist is meditating to get Shiva's blessings, and he's doing a lot of ascetic practices. Then Shiva himself comes incognito and asks her, are you doing all this by your own power, your own capacity? Then, of course, that's how it begins. But one statement Shiva makes is, it's kind of dialogue, is Sarira Madhyam Khalu Dharma Sadhanam. This body is the most wonderful instrument, the means for doing good things, great things, for practicing dharma. So body can be a very wonderful spiritual tool, or a tool that can eventually take us beyond body. So, though the description as such, if you identify yourself as the body, you're not much, just a passing phenomenon, comes and goes. But same body can be used to practice spiritual disciplines, to study great books, and to attain spiritual wisdom. For that also the body is a useful instrument. So this is 74th verse. We will discuss the 75th one next session. Then we can ask questions. You are most welcome to discussion. Okay.
Thank you for the lecture, Swamiji. I was looking at one of the verses you mentioned last lecture, actually.
Yeah.
Number 65 in the version I have.
Yeah.
Where it talks about the dissolution of whatever is drishya. Yeah, I was wondering if you could talk about, explain maybe a little bit more what's going on when it's talking about this dissolution of whatever is drishya.
Oh, Akrutva Drishya Vilayam, etc. Okay.
Yeah, number 65 of the book I have. So.
65, of course.
Kritva starts with.
65, of course, there's slight variation.
My Sanskrit pronunciation is not that good, but Kritva Drishya Vilayam.
Okay, correct.
Yeah.
I understand. Okay. So, Akrutva Drishya Vilayam Ajñato Tattvamatmanaha Bahi Sabdei Kudo Muktihi Ukti Matra Phalai Nranam. So, first of all, one should be able to transcend this awareness or transcend the realm of empirical phenomena. Drishya Vilayam means whatever is seen, perceived, objectified, this external world. Now, Vilayam here means going beyond. I gave the example from the serpent rope analogy, rope serpent analogy. If you repeat the analogy, let's say a piece of rope is lying in a room which is not well lit, semi-dark room. You can't see what it is, but you mistake it for a snake. You have seen a similar snake the previous day in a in a zoo or a forest, same color, same shape, so you mistake that rope is a snake because there is not enough light. When you bring light, what happens is the snake gets dissolved in the rope. Why do we call dissolved? The snake doesn't go away from there. The so-called snake is now perceived to be what it actually is, that is a rope. Like that, in Vedanta, first we discuss what this world is all about. And then we become fully convinced that it is just an appearance, a manifestation of Maya or Avidya. And at the same time, when you become spiritually enlightened, the world that you see in front of you doesn't fly away, doesn't disappear any more than the snake runs away from the room, because there is no snake really speaking, only snake idea. So when you get spiritual enlightenment in Vedanta, what happens is the world idea goes away. The world idea, what it means is, oh, I am this body. But this body also part of the world. The body is also part of the empirical phenomenon. And also all these that we see with our eyes, with what we normally witness and consider to be objects of enjoyment. And we normally think they are there all the time. They are permanent. They are eternal. The wrong notion. The wrong notion is similar to the wrong notion that this is a snake. So when you bring light, the snake goes away. Snake idea goes away. So when you get enlightenment, what happens? This empirical phenomena becomes known, it is recognized to be the absolute reality, appearing to be the empirical phenomena. So in fact, everything is Brahman, but not when we think of them in terms of name and form, nama and rupa. When we can think of them as the absolute reality seen to be in terms of nama rupa, then we think this world. But a spiritually enlightened person also lives in this world. I can give you an example. In Vedanta, what happens to a person who gets enlightened? One may ask this question. Often when we read in the book, oh, become Brahmajnani, does he become something else? He continues to be what he is. He continues to eat the food. He also will go to the Kaiser hospital when he falls sick. He also will wear clothes. He may even continue doing his job, his profession. But his attitude towards all these things will be different. A Buddha also will go to Kaiser hospital when he gets a report from the doctor. He doesn't say, I am Buddha, I won't go for treatment. The point is, he won't fall unconscious. If he gets the report by a medical doctor, he has cancer or something, he doesn't cry and weep, he doesn't fall unconscious. Calmly, with a smile, he'll go and talk to out his doctor. Take medicine. That's all. This is a very important point to remember. Because the world of empirical experiences is now seen in a different perspective. Again, this idea has got two dimensions. I want to emphasize that point. One dimension, the real thing, becoming a real Buddha, or a Shankaracharya, or Ramakrishna, enlightened, or Christ. I tell you, from my perspective as a Vedantin, when I read the New Testament, I read the Sermon on the Mount and the parables, I cannot but think that Christ also is a Vedantin, only he uses the language of his place, the analogy of his place. The parables are all taken from the Judeo-Christian socio-anthropological geographical background. But it is pure Vedanta if you read the Sermon on the Mount or the parables or anything. Not when you read Old Testament, Deuteronomy or Leviticus, you don't feel it's Vedanta. There's not much Vedanta in that. But if you read the parables and the Sermon on the Mount, it's pure Vedanta only. What I mean to say, so the point is, the same idea of transcending body consciousness transcending this empirical world enjoyments. That's what you find in higher Christianity also, in the mystical Christianity. Of course, in Buddhism, of course, in Vedanta. So the point is, becoming a Vedantin doesn't mean that he becomes something totally different. He may be still walking on two legs. If you are working, I told you the example of Janaka. Janaka had a much more important work to do as an emperor, a reigning monarch, than many of the CEOs of modern times, the Silicon Valley. But he was a great Vedantin. He was leading his armies when enemies attacked to protect his subjects from invasions. He was punishing culprits, and he was rewarding good people. He was working for the prosperity of his kingdom, and he's a Vedantin. The point is, he won't care a damn if all his efforts fail. Absolutely no problem. That's an important thing. There's an interesting story about Janaka. So, some people came and reported to him when he was somewhere in the forest, hermitage, teaching Vedanta to students. Somebody rushed to his hermitage, the monarch teaching in a hermitage, Vedanta philosophy. So, Mithila, the capital city of his kingdom, is on fire. So, he didn't go there. He finished his teaching, continued teaching for some time. Then only he made arrangements for putting out fire, asked people to rush to the capital city, the palace, put out fire. But even the class was going on, there were some poor people in the class who had nothing really speaking to lose. They rushed to their little huts and homes they didn't care for Vedantic discussion. They rushed to their homes to protect their belongings. Janaka had the whole kingdom, whole palace that was his. He continued teaching. It is not ignorance, because deep down in his mind he had the conviction that all these things are bound to come and go. So that kind of level-headedness, we may call it spiritual level-headedness, is the characteristic of an enlightened person. This is a very important point to remember. It doesn't mean insensitivity, inactivity, or indifference or negligence. A higher perspective towards the world that we are living in. That is the essence of Vedanta. Okay.
Just to try to decipher from my more limited level of knowledge than yours, obviously, is that when you see the snake, when you think you see the snake for the rope, that's the confusion, delusion, is avidya, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And when you realize that it's just the rope, then you're having vidya or enlightenment or whatever you want to say. So it's not that the rope changes, it's just that confusion, delusion goes away. That's what, is it talking about the dissolving of that confusion and delusion?
Exactly.
And seeing things, this fundamental unity of Brahman.
So it's a snake idea that disappears. Because there is no snake, there is only snake idea. And that snake idea was in his mind. That disappeared. Okay, that's it. Okay, thank you.
Swamiji, once again, there seems to be spiritual humor in the quest. We have spoken about the non-eternal, the impermanence, which leads one to believe or think or speculate that the eternity has its own permanence. Now, does the eternity have permanence if everything else is impermanent and fluctuating and in transition?
Could you repeat the question, the last part, transition?
Well, if
the last part,
if life itself is in transition, in flux.
Okay. The eternal.
Well, let me just add one more point.
Yeah.
it would lead the mind to begin to reflect on what is permanent.
Yeah.
So eternity appears to be eternal. So there's a little bit of humor in this. It's almost like the divine wanting to know itself.
Yeah.
In life, we wear these masks, and once we realize the divinity within and without, there's this great sort of a self-enlightenment.
Yeah. Yeah. So eternity or immortality or permanence in Vedanta has got some well-known definitions. One definition is, it is something that's neither born and that something neither exists nor dies. It's called, it defies the idea of time. It's seen to be the same in the past, present and future. And also it's beyond any kind of changes. So 6 changes are mentioned in Vedanta. In Sanskrit it's called Jayati, Asti, Vardhate, Viparinamade, Apakshiyate, Vinashyati. Means something that is born, existing, growing, evolving, decaying and disappearing, dying, so to speak. Now the birth itself, that itself is denied in Vedanta. Why? Because birth implies a state where it did not exist. Birth implies a transition from a state of empirical non-existence into a state of empirical existence. So the divine reality is present in all of us. So it's always existing without any change. So it never disappears. The point is, Vedanta as a rational philosophy appeals to people who can accept God but can also go beyond the idea of creation of this world and creator God of this world. This is a very important thing. It's not denied. The idea of God is not denied or rejected in Vedanta. All the great Vedantis were great devotees of God. But the point is, at the highest level, this idea goes beyond the idea of an anthropomorphic God idea. It's the same reality present everywhere. So, as I mentioned, we are discussing the idea of gross body. This gross body itself, as I mentioned, it itself can help us to manifest, to discover the inner divinity. The gross body is not divine, but with this gross body only you can go to Berkeley University Library and take a book on the Upanishad, Vivekachudamani, or Bible, anything you can take. You need a body, mind, everything is there in the gross body system. And also with this gross body only you meditate, you try to meditate, you do karma yoga, you do good things, you become a good human being, you practice compassion, all these virtues, you making a very good use of the physical body. But that will eventually take you beyond, it will help you to transcend the body level. That's the idea behind. So there's a journey in all religious traditions. In some traditions it's not well defined or well described. In every tradition, again it's not religious but spiritual journey. Remember, you have to understand spirituality that goes beyond religion as we understand it. So if you take the whole thing as a spiritual journey, eventually we are destined to realize, again not in this life necessarily, but in some future life, when we reach the supreme goal, that there is a divine spark present everywhere in everything. And that's what the teacher is slowly training the student to understand gradually in this book. At the end of the book, again you have to remember, the problem with religion as we understand the popular terminology and spirituality that is described here is, in popular religion, you believe in something, in a book, doing certain things, and then you are safe, you are in good terms with your idea of God, then you are okay. Otherwise not. Here no. You don't find any prayer or worship described in this book. It's all about self-discovery. You travel the journey in search of yourself. I mean, yourself. Self, yes, capital. You are traveling, you are beginning your journey in search of yourself, in search of yourself, your own true nature. It's very interesting, you can find. That's why Swami Tattwamayananda, who started the Shanti Ashrama, he was teaching this book there. That is, remember, 1900, you can imagine. Thankfully, because that time was quite appropriate, because the last of the transcendentalists has passed away. Whitman, Thoreau had passed away at that time, I believe. But transcendentalism had already prepared the soil. It has become quite rich and fertile soil for higher Vedanta. So Swami Tattwamayananda, who actually is the builder of the first Vedantic shrine, Hindu shrine outside Asia, in Shanti Ashrama, he was teaching this book. And another book that he was teaching was Patanjali Yoga Sutras. These texts do not teach you to go to a place of worship and pray to God and surrender. No. It teaches you to turn the inquiry inward. In your journey, you'll find Christ, you can pray to Christ. You find Buddha, you can pray to Buddha, whatever tradition you may belong to. You may be an agnostic. You will end up being a good person. So if an agnostic believes in reads Vedanta, you will end up becoming a wonderful human being. If a Christian reads it, he'll become somebody like Meister Eckhart. If a Buddhist reads it, he may end up being a Buddha. So that's the magic of this book. So anyway, as a matter of fact, I want to inform you, this month, in April 26, Saturday, we are celebrating the 125th anniversary of the founding of Shanti Ashrama and the founding of this Vedanta Society in Shanti Ashrama. That is April 26, Saturday. We have programs in the morning 11 onwards. We have reached there at least by 10 o'clock. There will be worship, meditation, devotional music, and some lectures, and there will be some of our devotee volunteers will take you around the shrine. It's a 160 acres land area. It's the first Hindu shrine which survived no less than 3 wildfires. So in 1952, then we had about 15 wooden cabins there. All except the shrine was burnt. And again later in 1988, and then recently 4 years ago, we had another fire. The shrine remains intact. So you are most welcome to attend that event, April 26, Shanti Ashrama pilgrimage. You can see information in our website. You can do RSVP. Thank you. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.